Who are a few of the worst romance scammers around? Would it be this influencer who kidnapped a wealthy businessman and then forced him to play Russian roulette? Or is it this nurse who catfished women into sending compromising photos just for fun? Or is it this guy who got money from women by promising to go on vacation with them? Let's find out all the details, starting with number 6, Russian roulette. Roani da Silva Sampaio, a self-proclaimed digital influencer, was sentenced to 23 years for her involvement in a shocking armed robbery in Brazil. She lured a wealthy businessman, Abel Landim, under the pretense of meeting for a private encounter at his luxury apartment. But that private encounter ended up not being what Landim was expecting. While Sampaio kept Landim distracted, her boyfriend, Francisco Moises Sousa Batista Jr., and 2 accomplices broke into the apartment. They bound Landim with plastic zip ties. Then Batista began to brutalize him, using a loaded firearm to scare the poor man. The group demanded that Landim reveal where he had hidden his valuables, escalating the pressure by playing a cruel game of Russian roulette. Fearing for his life, Landim eventually gave in. The gang stole a large sum of cash, cameras, and other high-end items before raiding his bank accounts after forcing him to reveal his passwords. Security footage showed the group kicking in the apartment door, armed and ready to take whatever they could. Despite the terrifying situation, Landim managed to call the police while the gang ransacked his home. Officers arrived in time to arrest Sampaio and her boyfriend, bringing the terrifying ordeal to an end. Sampaio, who had helped plan the entire heist by tipping off her boyfriend, was convicted alongside the other members of the group. Batista and his accomplices were sentenced to 20 years each, and the group was also ordered to pay 10,000 Brazilian real, which is roughly $2,000, in compensation to the victim. Number 5. Wrong vibes only. Nurse Adele Rennie was sentenced to 22 months after being convicted of using fake male identities to stalk and harass multiple victims. Between 2012 and 2016, Rennie manipulated her victims through social media and dating sites, using these false personas to engage in provocatively charged conversations, solicit explicit photos, and then she'd blackmail the victims when they tried to end contact. Rennie, who worked at Cross House Hospital, used voice-changing apps to pose as men, including doctors, and sent provocative photos of a man she claimed to be, pressuring her victims for the same in return. Her deceptive tactics extended beyond digital interactions, with some victims even receiving flowers from her aliases, and in one case, she accessed a victim's medical records to further her manipulation. In a particularly notable incident, Rennie targeted Abby Draper, a model and former Miss Scotland finalist, after meeting her at the hospital. Draper, visiting her ill grandfather, noticed Rennie constantly lingering around her family, following them to the gym and grocery store. Rennie posed as David Graham, a doctor, to connect with Draper on social media. Suspicion grew when a mutual friend recognized the fake account as the same one used to contact someone else. So naturally, the police were called. The final bit of evidence that sealed the deal was when she attempted to delete a key Instagram account and hit a mobile phone during a police search of her home. Rennie's scheme left her victims feeling unsafe as she escalated the harassment by threatening to expose intimate photos and fabricating elaborate stories involving family members passing away. The court described Rennie's behavior as meticulously calculated, with the judge expressing disbelief over her ability to harm so many people despite having a stable job and background. She was ultimately sentenced to 1 year, 10 months in prison for her crime. The scariest thing about this case was that it seems like there was no real motive beyond just manipulating and harassing people. It's weird to hear about stories like this from someone who dedicated their life to helping people. Number 4, always needing money. Debbie Fox, an Arvada resident, lost $58,000 in a romance scam. However, the crazy thing about her story wasn't the amount she lost. It is what police discovered about tracking her money in the world of crypto. It all started when Debbie, feeling confident after 18 months of solo travel, decided to join an online dating site. There, she met a man named Russell, who claimed to be a wealthy international businessman working on a solar project in Saudi Arabia. Their connection grew quickly through video chats and deep conversations. Debbie was cautious, but felt reassured when Russell provided documents and websites to prove his legitimacy. Things took a turn when Russell told Debbie about a tragic incident involving his project in Saudi Arabia, which led to financial strain. He asked for her help, saying he needed $48,000 to cover unexpected expenses. Debbie, who was still cautious but wanting to trust the guy, wired the money. Russell stayed in touch, maintaining the illusion of their relationship, and soon asked for an additional $10,000. Debbie, convinced of his sincerity, sent the second payment. Then, Russell's supposed attorney reached out, claiming he had been arrested and thrown in prison. It was that moment when Debbie realized something was very wrong. What followed was a frustrating battle to recover her lost money. Debbie reported the crime to several federal agencies, only to be told that somehow her loss wasn't significant enough for further investigation. Left feeling powerless, she found herself struggling not just financially, but emotionally, dealing with the trauma of betrayal. Detective Adam Ross from Arvada Police took on Debbie's case, and his investigation led to a breakthrough. By tracing her money through a crypto exchange, Ross discovered a trail that could be followed. As of the release of this video, the investigation is ongoing, and international complexities remain, but Ross's work could pave the way for other departments to take similar cases more seriously. Debbie, now focused on advocacy, is writing a novel about her experience, hoping to raise awareness for victims of online scams. Number 3. Honey trapping. Hollie Cheeseman was sentenced to 6 years in prison for her role in a scheme that lured men back to her apartment with the promise of an intimate encounter. The men, believing they were about to spend the night with Cheeseman, definitely had an intimate encounter, but not one that they liked. As one unsuspecting man prepared for said encounter, Cheeseman's boyfriend, Jeremy Long, burst into the room with a knife, threatening him. Together, the couple forced the man to hand over his bank card. Long tried to withdraw money from the man's account, but it was empty. Long wasn't exactly happy about this unexpected state of financial affairs, and things quickly escalated. So the couple took their victim to his home, where they stole his TV, laptop, and any other valuables they could grab. Once back at Long's apartment, they settled in, watching the stolen TV, only to be interrupted by police bursting in to arrest them. Cheeseman denied her involvement, claiming she had intended to have a transactional relationship with the victim. However, a jury found her guilty of 2 counts of robbery and false imprisonment. Jeremy Long, who admitted to the charges, also received a 6-year sentence. Throughout the trial, it became clear that Cheeseman's situation was even more complicated. She was heavily pregnant during her sentencing and faced the possibility of losing custody of her child once born. The court acknowledged that the prison had a mother and baby unit, but the child could only stay with her for a limited time. Despite her defense team's pleas for leniency, citing the future of her unborn child, the judge focused on Cheeseman's disturbing lack of remorse and empathy for the victim. While the judge considered her pregnancy in the sentencing, it wasn't enough to reduce her punishment. We don't like to see children being taken from their parents, but man, it seems like that baby would be better off being raised by a pack of wolves. Number 2. Honey trapping 2. A 73-year-old man, whose name wasn't released, thought he was about to embark on a romantic evening after meeting 34-year-old Chelsea Wright at a Daytona Beach bar. Wright invited him to follow her home, but what happened after they left was far more than he bargained for. As the duo headed back to Wright's place in separate cars, Wright made an unexpected stop to pick up someone from the side of the road. That someone was Andrew Marks, 33, her ex-boyfriend, though the man had no idea. The cars continued driving to a secluded area, which seems like it should have been a pretty bright red flag, where Wright suddenly dropped Marks off. Still thinking the night was heading in a romantic direction, the man got out of his car to approach Wright's vehicle. But then, things took a bad turn for the elderly man. Marks suddenly reappeared and confronted the man, using a metal object to harm him. The situation escalated, leaving the man on the ground unable to defend himself. After stealing the man's wallet, both Marks and Wright fled, leaving the 73-year-old lying there, seriously injured. The man was later rushed to the hospital with several severe injuries. When authorities got involved, they quickly began to piece together what had happened. Wright and Marks had obviously conspired to rob the man, luring him from the bar with promises of a romantic encounter. During the investigation, Wright was caught and tried to claim that the culprit was an elderly woman with Alzheimer's and not her boyfriend. Text messages between Wright and Marks revealed their plan, confirming their roles in the crime. Both Wright and Marks were arrested, and as of the release of this video, are facing charges for their roles in the robbery. Number 1. Money back. A woman from Glasgow, who preferred to remain anonymous, became the victim of an elaborate scam that cost her over £3,000. After meeting a man on Tinder, who went by the name Chris Harkins, the two quickly hit it off. They planned a luxurious trip to Mykonos, and after a few dates that went really well, she transferred a little over £3,200 to cover the cost of the hotel and flights. Everything seemed fine at first, but then things took a turn. After transferring the money, the woman grew suspicious since things were moving a little too fast. So she contacted Harkins about some small details, for example, luggage allowances, and jokingly mentioned that he better not have run off with her money, which is exactly what he did. Although he initially reassured her, it turned out that the vacation was never actually booked. Harkins then asked her for an additional £12,000, claiming his bank account was blocked. After the woman refused to give him the additional money, Harkins became less responsive, but didn't completely ghost her. When he was in contact, though, he continued to make excuses about his bank account being blocked and kept promising her that he would return the money. Months passed with no sign of repayment, until Harkins reached out again, promising to meet and return the money. But unsurprisingly, he never bothered showing up to their meeting. The victim, understandably feeling humiliated and embarrassed, began sharing her story in the hopes of warning others. Finally, after intervention from a local newspaper, Harkins agreed to return the funds. We guess something about being publicly called out bothered him. However, he still made wild excuses, claiming his account was frozen again, and even told the woman to go to a fast food place where the money would supposedly be waiting. Ultimately, the woman did get her money back 3 months after it was initially taken. When discussing the situation, the woman said she's still deeply embarrassed, but said she hopes that by speaking out, others won't fall victim to similar schemes. She acknowledged how emotional manipulation played a role in the scam, and while it has shaken her trust, she said she's determined not to let this experience change her. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section what you'd rather have to own: $1 million house or a $200,000 car.